Welcome to the Trumpet of the Last Few Days. I'm Stanley Farrar.
I'm Robert Farrar.
And I'm Joshua Farrar. On a side note, I have come to an opinion about Cyberpunk 2077 after about 28 hours playing it. And it has its problems. It has a lot of problems. But it has the best questing I have seen since Morrowind.
I didn't think you were even going to play the game, to be honest.
I was debating about whether or not to play it. In the end, I decided to basically vote with my wallet and stick by these large single-player releases that have no microtransactions.
Yeah, probably for the better.
Yeah. Anyway.
Anyway, to work.
Speaking about voting, currently YouTube has taken and passed a policy stating that anyone who takes and tells the truth about our current election and gets banned. So we won't be discussing a certain F word on this broadcast. We'll just use other terms to say the same thing.
Ah, yes. Wide-scale voter frog. Right off the tadpole.
You gotta watch
the lily pad.
You gotta watch those voter frogs.
Yeah.
They'll mess up your election every time.
Yeah. Always jump into conclusions and such.
They're so uninformed.
It's because they're nocturnal.
That would do it.
They don't really start acting. They just don't really start acting till about 1 or 2 in the morning.
That they keep all their bugs in their machines.
Wait, Dad, are you saying they wait till all the vote watchers are told to leave and then they vote?
Standard voter frog behavior.
They wait until all those that are looking out for frogs take and leave, and then they're alone in the lily pad, so they can be as froggy as they want.
Then a couple 100,000 voter frogs swarm the scene.
This may be too thinly veiled to protect us, but I don't care. I'm leaving it in.
So, actually, not talking about voter frogs.
The Texas
lawsuit was kind of a big deal because it basically argued that because the other states had violated their own election law, they had diluted Texas's vote, and then some 19 other states backed Texas, as well as 126 Republican representatives and the president, only for every single member of the Supreme Court to decide we're not even going to look at it.
Every single one? It was a unanimous decision?
It was a unanimous decision.
Yep. Despite 2 that are in writing stating that conflicts between the states have to be seen by the court.
And those 2 said that they would have seen it, but they weren't going to overturn the electors. They said it.
So, how do we impeach the entire Supreme Court?
Basically speaking, it requires 2/3 of the Senate.
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen at all.
It's not going to happen. Basically, the reason why, constitutionally, why when conflicts between states go straight to the Supreme Court is because they don't want states declaring war on each other. But effectively, that one the only thing to stop them from having to declare war, they took away from Texas and the other 19 states that supported them. So we're looking at where the red states, they can take and wait and see if anybody in the House of Representatives and the Senate has the spine to declare it a contested election,
which isn't likely to happen,
forcing it into a vote.
Because expecting a politician to have a spine is optimistic, to say the least.
They can declare, the red states can declare war on the four criminal states and invade or blockade them, not allow anything in and out. Basically, open warfare, which would probably be the preferential way. The other option is secession. Just take their ball and go home.
Mm-hmm.
Or some call it amputation.
Personally, I think that's the preferable option. I am a little curious how it would affect the military overall, but I do think the secession would be the preferable option.
Well, secession would lead to another 18C.
It depends.
It would lead to open warfare. Of that,
I'm not entirely convinced on that. Because the fact that if the red states were to secede, that's the majority of the country.
Yeah. And it was a huge chunk of the country last time.
Yes, but a huge chunk and a majority are two different things.
It wasn't majority.
And not to mention, they didn't go to war immediately after the secession.
Yeah, they did.
No, they didn't. They did not.
It wasn't until the South fired upon the Northern troops.
Yeah, because the South was convinced that the North was going to attack. And maybe that was the issue.
Yeah, but
But Lincoln had already vowed he was
that was just it. They did until they. Yes, but he didn't have support of Congress.
And there is a reason why there hasn't been a formal declaration of war since since around World War I. Maybe World War II.
World War II is a formal declaration of war.
We had a Desert Storm was a formal declaration of war.
The War on Terror was a formal declaration of war.
A war on terror means nothing.
Mm-hmm.
A formal declaration of war on a vague concept is not a declaration of war at all.
What it was
posturing.
It was a carte blanche to go attack whoever you wanted to in the Middle East.
That's
what it was.
Mm-hmm. But like I said, though, when Iraq invaded Kuwait, they got a formal declaration of war from Congress before they invaded.
Okay.
So yeah, that was a declared war. It only lasted 8 days, but It was the formal declared war.
They surrender in 8 days?
Yes.
Not overly surprising.
The right now, a New Jersey congressman has put forth to Pelosi that they shouldn't seat any of the congressmen that took and signed on to challenge the criminality of those 4 states. And if they do that, that removes the representation of the majority of the red states from Congress.
Which means
It also removes
that none of those states can be taxed.
Oh, they would still tax them.
I know. I was just going into technicalities.
But it comes down to that forces them into no representation. In fact, it's they're to do it. They have to declare that those congressmen are taking and performing sedition, and so they're calling them all traitors for not accepting criminality. You either accept us breaking the law, or you're a criminal. You're a traitor to your country if you don't accept us breaking the law.
And for those of you who debate whether or not laws have been broken, that was the whole crux of the Texas suit, was that they had violated the law in order to perform their elections in the way that they did. It wasn't a fraud argument in the typical sense of the idea of voter fraud.
In fact, it had nothing to do with fraud. The entire suit was just about the legality of their procedures. Nothing to do with fraud.
And the whole point of the suit was to send it back to the states, those individual states, to fix for their own legislators to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was so blatant and so obvious they had broken their own laws that the Supreme Court didn't want to face the political backlash, because they knew how they would have to adjudicate if they actually saw the case. So they refused to see the case,
which is effectively
like, nothing's happening here because I don't see a thing.
Yeah. I just lost my analogy, so I'm just going to pretend I never started saying it.
It's spineless cowardice. That's what it is.
Oh yeah, it's totally spineless cowardice. And I personally think that they all should be impeached. They are for violating their oath of office.
Yeah. It would be one thing if they saw the case, found no evidence of legality, which I don't believe would happen, but if they did, theoretically, and then ruled that there was no law breaking, that would be one thing. But refusing to even see the case, that's another altogether.
Well, I think what they think is going to happen.
And that's some of the...
I think what they thought, what was going through their heads is, if we rule on this, and we all know that the evidence is plain, the evidence is clear, they did violate their laws and therefore violated the Constitution. But if we rule on this, then there's going to be a revolt from the left, which already has been leaning toward revolt for quite a while. But they don't believe that the right will do it. So they'd much rather just hit the right to try to keep everything together than hit the left.
Which means it's time for the right to take and secede.
Mm-hmm. To prove they're not all talk.
Which Southern Rush Limbaugh says has been, yeah, Because Rush Limbaugh has been saying that things have been moving that direction anyway.
Yeah.
If the red states were to secede, the in the 1860s, the people who were in the military were allowed to leave because their states. But I don't think that'll happen this time.
Probably not.
So what would probably happen is the military would end up with a choice: either they follow the commands of the left coast and the northeast coast, or do they follow or do they take and come to the aid of the rest of the country?
Question is, it would be a real dilemma for anyone.
Which is no longer part of the United States.
It would be a thing for. I think it would be a bad move for the military as a whole to try to force people to stay in on that regard, because then they would be dealing with a lot of internal problems, and they would have to strip a lot of people of their security clearances because they can no longer be trusted, especially if they're being forced to stay in. It would be an interesting way that they would have to handle it from a security standpoint alone.
Well, being the majority of the U.S. military is from red states.
Yeah. But the worst move they could possibly make would be to try to force everyone to stay in, because that would basically turn the entirety of the military against them.
But they're totalitarians.
They are totalitarians. The question is, would they be that stupid?
We say it, you obey.
Yeah.
Yes, I think they would be. I think they would be that stupid. I think it doesn't take you don't have to be a genius to take and be on the left. If they were geniuses, they would have never gotten caught breaking their own laws. Because they would have finagled it around to where they didn't break the law, because the law would have been legally changed instead of them just dictating from the bench.
Yeah.
Or from their governors. I'm
not saying that the mob are geniuses, but they did do it the right way if you look at Nevada.
Yes, that's true. Nevada did it the right way. If you're going to take and cheat in an election, Nevada's the prime candidate on how to do it. They changed the laws to where you couldn't check anything the legal way. So there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Hmm.
Arizona's the same way. But Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia, Pennsylvania, they've blatantly disobeyed the law, and it's like, yeah, we broke our laws.
What are you going to do about it?
What you going to do about it? You going to disenfranchise millions of people? See, that's why the courts won't touch it.
Well, it's disenfranchise millions of people or disenfranchise millions of people. There's really no way about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, but the thing about the Democrats argue as long as your vote counted, you haven't been disenfranchised. They don't take in the fact that it's been watered down by all the illegal votes that were counted.
Mm-hmm.
Because when an entire election is operated in violation of the law, all the votes don't count.
Yeah. Everyone is disenfranchised. Even the people who voted for the candidate that's cheated.
And the governors of these, according to, and some of these states, even the House of Representatives of these states signed on as injured parties
Mhm.
because they weren't allowed to take and have a say in it, and they're the ones with the authority.
Yeah.
With the constitutional authority, yeah.
Georgia state Congress said that they're not allowed to meet unless the governor calls them into session, and the governor will not call them into session. Thus ensuring that they can't fix the problem. I don't know about the situations in Michigan, but I know that their House of Representatives also took and signed on to the Texas lawsuit. So their own Congresses are saying they broke the law, and because they didn't take it to us like the Constitution requires,
Mm.
and nobody's doing anything. Okay. Being there, ignoring the criminality that's taking place. And they're also not discussing the fact that half the country was a party of that lawsuit on one side, and half the country was on the party of the lawsuit on the other side. That something should have been done.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the fact that half the states came out in support of the Texas lawsuit, and half the states came out in opposition to the lawsuit, they're looking at and say, "Oh no, that's a civil war act fixing to happen."
Which I don't think they realize that ignoring the problem will not make it go away.
Which is why a representative of Texas has floated the idea of secession in the Texas legislature. And that's not just the head of the GOP, that's an actual representative.
Mm-hmm.
So that's two prominent members of the Texas Republican Party who have floated the idea of secession.
And think about it, if they don't seat those 140 some congressmen, and because they dare point out that these states broke the law, then their only option is to secede.
But they're not going to do that. They don't have enough support in the House to not seat representatives.
I could see Pelosi take and make a just declare that they are no longer right.
No, all she has to make is what they call a committee. That's it. She makes a committee to do it.
Now that she could do.
And by choosing the specific people in the committee, then it doesn't matter if they've got bipartisan support. They can just declare it.
Because she doesn't have the authority to do that.
That wouldn't stop her. Otherwise, if she couldn't do it, then the congressman from New Jersey wouldn't have suggested that she could do it.
Well, they suggest things they don't have the authority to do all the time.
And they do things they don't have authority to do all the time. But see, at the beginning of each session, she reads off who is the representatives, the recognized representatives that have in the House. And if she leaves those names off, they're not in the House. They're not recognized, so they aren't given the right to. They won't be given the right to vote. They'll just ignore them. They can say anything they want to. They just won't pay any attention to them.
Dirty politics.
Well, I'd like to see them do it. I really would.
Now, technically speaking, if they had any guts, it only takes one representative and one member of the Senate to take and stand up and declare this election to be a contested election and force it into a vote by Congress.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
Because I don't either. But if they did that, then each state gets one vote in the House, and that determines who the president is.
Mm-hmm.
And then each state gets one vote in the Senate, and that determines who the vice president is. But they could easily take and say it's a contested election, and there has been accusations of criminality. Not to mention there's numerous lawsuits challenging it.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, the Wisconsin lawsuits are not done yet. It's going up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is rumored to be fairly favorable to their position.
We already saw what the Supreme Court favors. We know how this is going to end.
Not that Supreme Court, the Wisconsin Supreme Court.
Oh, okay. He could have specified.
It's like in Pennsylvania. It went up to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, but the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's a bunch of Democrats, and so they're not going to give the Republican Congress a say in the matter.
But here's the problem: whether Wisconsin wins or not, they still have to win 2 other states.
Well, see, that's just it. That we know that 4 states broke the law.
I know, but
even if their count was legitimate, they both broke the law.
Yeah, but say Wisconsin successfully, the Supreme Court says you did it illegitimately. The legislator needs to certify the electors. Then there still has to be 2 other states to do that. Otherwise, it's like, okay, Wisconsin fixed its problems, but what about the other 3?
Mm-hmm. The thing about it is, can Wisconsin fix their problems by Monday?
Not a chance.
The Electoral College officially gets seated Monday.
Yeah, but the vote doesn't take place.
They don't vote until January.
That's one thing they were talking about, the safe harbor deadline. The safe harbor deadline was a manufacturing by the Supreme Court. Well, actually, no, by legislation that's not constitutionally binding.
Mm-hmm. Now, and there's the Red House siege.
I forgot about that.
The Red House siege, for those of you who don't know, with all of this talk of secession by the people on the right, people can easily forget about what the left is doing right now.
Where they're trying to force secession. By creating autonomous zones. Yes, another one.
And it's expanding.
The Chaz slash Chop may have failed, so they're going for an even more militant experiment this time. So the Red House, there was a family that stopped paying their rent back in their mortgage payments back in 2018. And so they faced eviction.
Mortgage.
And instead of actually being evicted, they just squatted in that house. And now everyone's like, "Oh, it's the coronavirus. You can't evict these people." And they're people of color. So the left, specifically Antifa, has taken up arms to defend the house and drove away the police. Well, now they've started expanding the zone, setting up checkpoints and taking nearby buildings.
There has been a fundraising GoFundMe that raised enough money to buy the mortgage on the place, but it still doesn't change the fact that they can't even get to it because Antifa's got the whole area locked down.
Well, yeah, now they're carving out parts of Portland for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Turning Portland into
and they're
a war
declaring
zone.
it
Again.
an autonomous zone. So it is they're declaring themselves an independent country, just like if one of the states were to secede, except for this is like a 6-block area,
if even that,
or less. Yeah.
Well, 6 blocks is more than they had last time.
Yeah, well, they're learning.
I'm guessing.
They're better armed than they were last time.
They say that they are barricaded in and they have a stockpile of weapons. And they did fire on the police when the police came to evict them.
And you got to remember that with Seattle, they had favorable politicians. Mayor Wheeler is semi-favorable, but he still wants them out of there.
Well, he's a favorable politician, but he can't have them shooting at the police.
Even though he wants to defund the police.
Yeah, but from a political standpoint, if you start shooting at the police, then you start undercutting your own arguments. So you can't really let that keep going on. You have to keep the illusion that the police are the bad guys, but as long as the police are under fire, they're not the bad guys anymore. That's politics.
And it's a false illusion in the first place.
But essentially, the communist revolt has already begun.
Yeah. And Black Lives Matter screaming because that Biden and Harris hasn't taken and called them in to meet with them so they could list their demands of the new agenda, the new
regime,
administration. Yeah, the new regime. They said that they said, we put you in office. You've got to do what we say. So the militant communists are definitely starting to demand that the Democrats start taking and paying them back for all that they've done for them.
Which means if the Republican states secede, all they have to do is just let the other states collapse to the communist regimes and then take them back over.
So, here's an interesting thought exercise.
Self-destruct.
If all of what we're seeing comes to a head and the country splits, how many countries will it split into and why?
Two to three.
I'm guessing actually closer to 4 to 5, maybe even 6.
My money would be on 4.
The reason why I say 2 to 3. The reason why I said 2 to 3 is because the economies are so interdependent.
But here's the problem: you've got Michigan, Wisconsin, and Illinois up north. They could all forge kind of a league together. You've got the Northeast, and then you've got California. and Nevada.
Okay,
My money's on
you've got
4.
a point there. It is very. It does. I figured that see, Michigan is not that far away from New York and that northeastern block. I figured they'd be one nation. Yes, but that's just water.
Yeah. Yes, just water that their opponents could use against them.
So
only if they have a navy.
I think the Northeast will become one, kind of like basically that entire block up there, along with Illinois and parts of the Midwest. I think Alaska will break off and become completely independent and solitary because they are well, not impossible, but extremely difficult to siege, as well as the fact that they are not dependent on anyone for anything. Hawaii, because it is so dependent on people for everything, is going to stick with California, Oregon, Washington, Nevada, and become sort of like the West Coast block itself. You've got the general South that'll mostly stay together, minus, say, like Georgia and Virginia. And that
Virginia
will be
the northeastern
be one section, while you'll have most of the Midwest, which will be off and independent by itself, separate from the Northeast.
Well, the Midwest would band together with Texas. Well, Texas would band together with the South, so...
Not necessarily. I think there's enough cultural and philosophical differences that they would split into two. But then again, that would change my estimation to 5. So correction, I will go with your thing just to stick to my 4 number and say that they will all be together, but you will end up with Northeast, West, South, and Alaska.
See, I think Alaska is just going to team up with the South, to be honest, because they're culturally similar enough.
They may be culturally similar, but considering the fact that they've got no real major enemies and they could go isolationist, which is kind of what they've always been like, so very easily, I think it would be very simple for them to just become independent and isolated. That, and it would be cheaper for them too.
Yeah, except for the fact that they have strong ties with Texas.
Yeah.
The oil countries.
But just because you've got 4 different countries doesn't mean you don't have 2 sets of allies.
Now, I think that Hawaii either would end up being by itself or part of the West Coast.
Yeah, I think that Hawaii would end up joining the West Coast because it's reliant too much on trade, and they would not let such a major military base go. There's too much funding there, and most of them are lefties anyway. So I think they would very easily merge in with California, Oregon, Washington. Or
now Guam would join Hawaii.
Or as I'm going to call that individual theoretical country, Hollywood of the Latter-day Saints. Write in the comments theoretical country ideas for the 4 different nations.
We need names.
Thing about it is that you know that Texas, Louisiana, Oklahoma, Arkansas will be a block.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Possibly
with Mississippi and Alabama and Missouri.
Missouri may go left.
Or it may just go off on its own.
Missouri is very...
It's a purple state.
Missouri is contested territory, agreed. Florida,
Kansas-
I don't really know. Florida's another purple
Kansas,
state.
Nebraska, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Montana would join in with Texas.
That whole
Yeah.
central strip would join in with Texas.
Idaho, I don't know. Same with Utah. I don't know.
Yeah, they're kind of. They may vote Republican, but they're kind of questionable.
Mhm.
While Colorado, New Mexico will go with California.
Well, we know that West Virginia would go with the red states.
Oh yeah, for sure. It's funny.
But Virginia, I'm pretty confident would go with the blue states, mostly
If West
from
Virginia,
what I've learned about Virginia from being there.
I think Kentucky and Tennessee would go with the red states as well.
Yeah.
if West Virginia seceded, that would be hilarious.
Ohio. I mean, they refused to secede last time.
Yeah.
It would be an interesting thing of irony if they went opposite directions this time.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Ohio didn't go with Illinois and Indiana.
Because Ohio doesn't vote like Illinois. I figure it would.
No,
go
it
with
doesn't.
Iowa.
But they have a strong prejudice against the South.
That they do. And if it took choosing between who they philosophically agree with and old prejudices, I would put my estimate on their old prejudices every time. That's also the reason why I'm pretty sure Missouri would not go with the North.
Would not go with the North?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they would stick with the South just for old prejudice's sake.
They were divided last time.
Yeah. A lot of years have built up since then. A lot of prejudices have taken time to build.
Well, you figure that all of Missouri except the St. Louis area is pretty strongly red.
Yeah.
But St. Louis is right on the Illinois border.
It's possible that some of the states as we know them will be torn asunder. And the borders will be redrawn again.
It's very possible.
That's not only possible, that's very likely.
Yeah. But we were speaking in broad strokes earlier, so for convenience sake. All I know is that...
if they took and actually started breaking up county by county, it's going to get really...
All I can say with confidence...
California just...
All I can say with confidence is that the country of the South, if you will, would not end up as being the Lone Star country because there's just too many states that would vote against it.
Well, yeah, they couldn't become the Republic of Texas because there's just too many states.
Yeah.
And not all those states are Texas.
If it was just...
I know Texas is a great place, but...
If it was just Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, and Arkansas, they could probably swing it. But...
I don't know. Okies are not...
Half of Oklahoma used to belong to Texas anyway.
Part of the state of Oklahoma. Not all.
Part of it did.
But everyone who's been in that area has been to Texas at least once.
Part of New Mexico did too, and part of Colorado did.
Yeah.
Most of them have family in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Oklahomans are very strong in asserting that they are not Texans.
Unless they're from oh man.
Even though you like to refer to them as Texas Light or something.
Yes, Texas Light. That's Oklahoma. It's Texas Light.
But I think that one congresswoman in Texas has taken and bit off more than she can chew with the way things are going right now.
What's that?
A congresswoman in Texas took and put out a deal on wanting to do away with the castle doctrine in Texas and make it where you have to retreat if somebody breaks into your home, and that if they get hurt while on your property, you're responsible.
Can you say political suicide?
Political suicide.
When she said that, it's like, you do realize you're in Texas and not
and Texas is currently
out east someplace, right?
Texas is currently undergoing a reassertion of its culture.
And while I may not be in my home country of Texas, I can take and state that those native sons and daughters are not going to take that lightly.
And no one with a brain would either, but that's another story.
You think they'll burn Austin if they secede?
I wouldn't be surprised if Black Lives Matter and Antifa doesn't. Of course, I wouldn't put them past burning Austin as it is.
Well, as I've said before, cities are a failed experiment, and they need to be done away with. People were not meant to live that close together.
In it,
we live in spread out cities.
If you look at
look at Jerusalem back in the day when people were just stacked on top of each other.
Robert, I can tell you from my experience in Italy, things have not changed that much in Europe. They still live stacked on top of each other like rats and roaches.
So nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed.
It's successfully worked kind of for 2,000 years. At least. More than 2,000 years.
You know how hard it was to find a place that I had space? That people wouldn't bother me? I had to find.
It's quite difficult.
I had to find the one apartment complex that had an attached farm because it was the only way I was getting space.
Well, I took and rented I went and rented a farm cottage out in the middle of nowhere when I was in Scotland on a sheep farm.
You'd probably have some interesting flashbacks here in Italy. There have been multiple times that I've been stuck in traffic for more than a few hours while I watched an entire herd of cows, sheep, goats, and such like being herded along the road right beside me.
So if you liked today's episode, feel free to hit the like button. If you disliked it, feel free to hit the dislike button. Either way, it's the algorithm. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to be notified when a new episode drops. And anyway, we still need names on the possible countries if you guys split apart.
At least 4, at most 6. And if you come up with a name, give the area that they're in and the reason why they're independent from everyone else.
Until then, see you next time.
We are also available on Rumble, Odyssey, the archive.org, and BitChute.
We're all over the place.
As well as YouTube.
Do we have more than just 4
We
episodes on
might
Rumble
not be
now?
on YouTube much longer.
Those frogs.
Yeah, widespread voter frogs.
Well, see you next time.